Welcome to episode 120 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. It's February 28, 1993. We're in Cairo, a World Cup qualifier, and a crowd so big it feels like the stadium is breathing. On the pitch, it's Egypt versus Zimbabwe, one of those group deciders where an entire campaign can tilt on a single afternoon. But what you're about to witness isn't just football, it's chaos, stones flying, a coach bleeding, an assistant referee getting hit, and a goalkeeper ducking concrete. And a match that ends 2-1, only for FIFA to later declare the result void and replay it 2,000 miles away in France under a top referee until the scoreboard finally matches something called normal sporting conditions. This is the story of the World Cup qualifier that Egypt won and Zimbabwe stole back in court. But how did we get here? To understand this match, you have to remember what African World Cup qualifying looked like in the early 1990s. 3 World Cup places, a continent's worth of ambition, and qualification formats that often turned into pressure cookers, short groups, few games, little margin, and immense political and emotional weight. Egypt arrived with recent memory. They'd been to the World Cup in 1990, their first appearance in decades, and they want to return. In Cairo, the idea of missing out doesn't feel like sport, it feels like failure. Zimbabwe arrived as something different, a generation, a team that for a brief period felt like it was about to break the ceiling for Southern African football. They were even nicknamed the Dream Team. They had Peter Ndlovu up front, and they had Bruce Grobbelaar in goal, the Liverpool European Cup winner with the swagger and the nerves of steel. And in this group, Group C, the story had already produced its first shock. In December 1992, Zimbabwe beat Egypt in Harare. Suddenly, the return match in Cairo isn't a routine home win. It's a potential ambush. Which is why Cairo on February 28 is not hosting a match. No, they're hosting a verdict. And you can feel it in the way the stadium behaves. Not like an audience, but like an instrument. The match kicks off, and Zimbabwe score early. 5 minutes in, Agent Sawu puts Zimbabwe ahead, 1-0. Silence for half a second, and then the noise turns darker. Because the match footage shows what the newspaper reports later confirm. Objects start raining down. At one point, the referee has to stop the game because the linesman is being pelted. You can see the stoppages, the confusion, the players looking toward the touchline, the officials trying to keep a straight line through something that has already become crooked. Then it gets worse. Zimbabwe's coach, Reinhard Fabisch, is hit in the head. You see him being treated, bandaged, taken out of his own technical area, the man trying to run a World Cup qualifier with blood on his scalp. And in goal, Grobbelaar is in the strangest job in football, being a goalkeeper while also being a target. Later he says he was struck in the head by concrete, not a plastic cup, not paper, but chunks of the stadium itself. That detail matters, because it's not just crowd trouble, it's structural. It suggests the stadium environment was literally crumbling into missiles. Somewhere inside the storm, football keeps happening. Egypt equalized through a penalty, and then take the lead before halftime. And what makes it feel surreal is that the match keeps trying to behave like sport, while everything around it is behaving like something else. In the footage, there are moments where objects land near players, and they do what you see footballers sometimes do in chaos. They pick things up and toss them away from the field of play, trying to remove danger, like you clear broken glass from the street. At one point, Grobbelaar appears to pick up an object near his area. Many remember it as a lighter, and throw it behind the goal line, just trying to get it out of the immediate zone. And then there's another long stoppage. After the assistant referee is hit, the game turns into a crowd scene. Officials, photographers, team staff, everyone clusters around the referee, pointing, shouting, pleading, arguing. It's a match surrounded by meetings. And somehow, after all that, the whistle goes. Egypt 2, Zimbabwe 1. Egypt think they've rescued their campaign and advanced to the next stage. But that is only half the story, and not even the most important half. Because Zimbabwe protest. They argue the match wasn't played under normal sporting conditions. They argue their players were struck, their coach was injured, the goalkeeper was injured, and that the environment itself made the contest fundamentally unsafe and unfair. FIFA listens, not casually, but formally. And 2 weeks later, FIFA annuls the match. The wording is devastating. It was indeed not played under normal sporting conditions, so the result is declared void. And now the qualification group is thrown back into uncertainty because suddenly Egypt don't have a win and Zimbabwe don't have a loss. And the table has to be decided the proper way on a neutral pitch without a hailstorm of concrete. So FIFA orders a replay, not in Cairo, not in Harare, but in France. A neutral venue, a top referee, a setting designed to remove the crowd as a weapon. And when the team meets again, the story flips. The replay ends 0-0. And that draw is enough for Zimbabwe to advance and for Egypt to be eliminated. Think about the emotional whiplash. Egypt go from believing they've survived to discovering they've been erased. And Zimbabwe go from believing they've been robbed to having FIFA hand them a chance to reclaim the campaign. And they take it. So what does all of this mean? First, it became a reminder that football is not only about the laws, it's about the conditions that allows the laws to matter. A match is not a match if the environment is unsafe. And a qualifier is not a qualifier if one team is being injured by the stands. And second, it showed the power of protest and the fragility of home advantage. For decades, African football has had an open secret. The most hostile venues can turn qualifiers into survival tests. And sometimes the line between intimidation and assault gets crossed. This case crossed it so clearly that FIFA intervened in the most extreme way possible. It erased the game. And third, it forced the sport to confront stadium security as a qualification issue. If chunks of concrete can be thrown, if the assistant referee can be struck, and if coaches can be bleeding on the sideline, then the stadium is not a venue, it's a hazard. Replays, neutral venues, security requirements, sanctions. These are not just administrative tools. They are football's attempt to defend the integrity of competition when the matchday ecosystem collapses. And this Egypt-Zimbabwe affair sits in a grim family of results that didn't survive the crowd. Sometimes it's violence, sometimes it's disorder, and sometimes it's deception. But the theme is the same. A game can be played, finished even, celebrated, and still not stand. Egypt, meanwhile, are left with the bitterest kind of elimination, one that feels like punishment and humiliation at the same time. Their campaign doesn't end because they were outplayed in 90 clean minutes. It ends because their home match became a global embarrassment. Zimbabwe don't get a World Cup out of it. They're eliminated later. But they do get something rare, a football story where the smaller team is protected by governance, where justice is not just a slogan, but a decision. Now, 3 things to take away from February 28, 1993. First, football's most important equipment isn't the ball, it's trust. When the match environment collapses, the result becomes a dispute, not a memory. And second, home advantage is not meant to be a weapon. When it becomes one, the sport eventually fights back with sanctions, replays, neutral venues, and reputational damage. And third, the strangest matches often produce the clearest lessons. Egypt won 2-1 on the pitch and still lost the qualifier in the end. On this day in 1993, Egypt beat Zimbabwe 2-1 in Cairo in a World Cup qualifier, played under a storm of stones, and FIFA later erased the result, replayed the match in France, and watched Zimbabwe advance while Egypt went home. That's all for episode 120 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Law Guy. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show, leave a rating, and share it with a fellow football historian. Tomorrow, we go to March 1st, 1921, and to Jules Rimet's election as FIFA president, and the ideas that changed world football forever. If you have ideas, corrections, or a story you want me to chase, you can always reach me at OTD@17lawsguy.com. See you tomorrow.